Perfect. Thanks, Ellen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
You can see the PowerPoint, right?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Well, hi, everybody. My name is Marianne Martorell. And like Ellen said, today we're going to be doing an essentials training for your PaperSave cloud migration. So during today's presentation, we'll start off with foundation. We'll start off with the basics, right? So how PaperSave integrates into RE or FE. We'll talk about logging in to PaperSave. We'll see viewing documents, adding documents, all from the integration. We'll also talk a little bit about using PaperSave outside of RE and FE. And then I'll switch over and I'll talk a little bit about PaperSave workflows. So this, I'll talk about what workflows are, what can be implemented within workflows. I'll do a little bit of a demo, and then we'll turn it over to our Q&A session. The way that I'm going to do the webinar today, I will flip between this PowerPoint presentation, which we can distribute to you after the webinar, and I'll also go into an internal development environment and show you a few of these things that we talk about. Okay. So starting off with the integration, so from the database view, and I'll talk about all the integration points, both from the database view and also from NXT, for those of you that do use NXT. So from the database view, we integrate directly. So you'll see that in any of the records with which PaperSave integrates, there will be a button in the menu ribbon. This button, and we'll go into these options shortly, allow you to interact with the documents on that record, whether it is to show them or to add new documents. And then we also add plugins to the plugins section of RE or FE, and these plugins come in handy when trying to also do external operations with PaperSave. So at the end of the training, when I talk about using PaperSave outside of RE or FE, I'll show you a few ways to get to those modules, but one of them is directly through those plugins. From NXT, we integrate directly with a tile. So it looks like any of the other NXT tiles. It is important to note that this NXT tile is only compatible with Chrome or Firefox browsers. From the tile, users can interact directly with PaperSave, very similar to how you do in the database view, in that you can see the documents attached to that record and you can add new documents to that record. Here is the list of the transaction types that we integrate directly with for Razor's Edge. So all of these are available from the database view. So that means that you can add and view documents within the PaperSave menu in any of these transactions in the database view. Now in NXT, we integrate with actions, constituents, and GIFs. So you'll be able to see that PaperSave tile in those three transaction types. For Financial Edge, the list is a little bit longer, but again, the ones with the asterisks are the ones that are supported for NXT. But all of them are available in the database view. So let's talk about logging into PaperSave. So from the database view, I'm sure you've seen it as we've done the migration. When you first launch the database view, it'll prompt you to authenticate into PaperSave. You can cancel that, which means you won't be enabled in PaperSave, or you can log in with your PaperSave credentials and it'll authenticate you into your PaperSave session for the database view. Okay. When you're logged into PaperSave in the database view, you are consuming a user license. And we're going to talk about user licenses in detail a little bit later in today's webinar. Okay. Now, if you're using Azure Active Directory, when you were prompted to log in, you will, of course, be prompted through your Azure authentication. Okay. You won't be entering your PaperSave specific credentials. You'll be entering your Azure credentials. For those of you that are not using Azure Active Directory, remember that your PaperSave credential will always have your PaperSave tenant ID appended to the end of it. Okay, so you'll always have that 6-digit number at the end of your username. And that's the username that you'll use to log in everywhere for PaperSave. So in the database view, in NXT, in your browser, everywhere. From NXT, the tile will be available as long as you're in that record that we integrate with. So let's say you're in a Razor's Edge constituent, you'll be able to see the PaperSave tile. The tile does need to be deployed by a system administrator, but once they deploy it, once your entire organization will have it. So it's just a one-time deploy that an admin will have to do. Now, the first thing that you're going to be prompted for in the tile is your root URL. So that root URL will be provided to each and every one of you. If you don't know what that is, we can definitely provide that for you. It'll be unique to each organization as it does have your PaperSave tenant ID. That root URL, you'll only have to enter it the first time that you log in, but you will have to enter it. So each user is going to have to enter it the first time that they log in. It's not, if I log in and I enter my root URL, the next person in my organization that logs in for the first time, they're also going to have to enter that. But it's only a one-time thing. After you've entered it the first time, it'll be stored. And after you've entered your root URL, you'll be prompted to enter your PaperSave credentials. So the same as any time that you're prompted to authenticate into PaperSave, you would enter your credentials here. Now, being logged into the PaperSave tile in NXT does not consume a user license. And then the third place where you'll log in is in your browser. So when you choose to view a document or when you choose to add a document, so most of your PaperSave actions will open in your default browser. So that means that you'll have to log into PaperSave through your browser as well. Okay, so these are the same credentials. You'll log into PaperSave, and here we do recommend that you remember your credentials because you'll be consuming a user license when you are logged into the browser. Now, the moment you close that tab, you're releasing that license. Okay, so but every time that you have content open, PaperSave content open in a browser, you'll be consuming the license. So there's no need to be logging in and out. So let's talk about viewing documents. Okay, so from the full database view, there are two options where we can view documents. In the menu, in the record, you'll see that there is a PaperSave Show Documents and then a PaperSave Show Interrelated Documents option. The Show Documents option will open the documents that are directly related to the record that you're on. So for example, if I'm on a constituent and I select Show Documents, this will show me all of the documents that are specifically saved on that constituent. Show Interrelated Documents shows documents that have a relationship in PaperSave. So there are certain relationships that PaperSave knows exist. So for example, PaperSave knows that a constituent is related to that constituent's gifts, right? So if I'm in Mark Adamson's constituent and Mark Adamson has given 10 gifts and each of those gifts have a document attached to it, if I say show interrelated documents, I am going to see all of the documents related to the constituent as well as the interrelated documents, which means the documents related to the gifts. Okay. From NXT, it's very simple. You can either double click on the row in the tile that you want to open. So if you know which document you want to open, you can double click it and it'll automatically open that single document. You can also check off multiple documents and use the open selected button to open multiple documents at a time. So adding documents. From the database view, the first option we have is, of course, in the menu ribbon, choosing the PaperSave Add Documents option. That will open the Add a Document window in your default browser. And then the second option that we have is clicking Save on the record itself, or Save and Close. This will actually prompt you if you want to add a document. Okay. Now, if you're constantly saving records and you don't want to be prompted, you can always say, you can check a box that says remember my answer and you hit no and you won't be prompted again. But you do have those two different options. And then from NXT, you have the plus symbol, which will again open your add a document window in your default browser. Okay. So I'm going to switch over real quick. All right. And Ellen, can you confirm that you can see my Razor's Edge screen?
I do not see your Razor's Edge screen. What I'm seeing is the PaperSave PowerPoint.
Okay, 1 second.
I believe instead of viewing your desktop, we're viewing an application.
Okay, 1 sec.
There we go.
All right. You see RE, right?
I do.
Perfect. All right. So just real quick to recap, what we've talked about is the integration points of PaperSave within Razor's Edge or Financial Edge. These will be the same in either application. You will have your PaperSave menu option in records that we integrate with. So in the options, you have Add Document, which will open up in your default browser. You have your Show Documents, which again, I'm in a constituent right now, so this will only show me the constituent documents, or Show Interrelated Documents, which will show me any documents related to the record that I'm on, as well as any documents that have a relationship with the record that I'm on. So again, for example, if I'm on a constituent, I'll be able to see all of the constituent documentation as well as the gift documentation. So let me log in real quick. So for example, I hit the Add a Document window or the Add a Document option, and it brought me to the Add a New PaperSave Document window in my default browser. Now, I'll go over each one of these options, the different ways that we can add documents, in just a moment. So if I go back to the record and I hit Show Documents, it'll open up in my default browser, and it'll show me a list of all of the documents related to the record that I'm on. So up here, it gives you the record information, so you know that you're viewing the documents related to this constituent, and then it'll give you a list of all of the documents available. Whenever you have a grid like this, you can open up a document by double clicking on it, so you'll be able to see the document in the center of your screen, and then you'll have the profile fields on the right. Okay, so you have your thumbnails and you can navigate between your document. Okay, so that was viewing the documents. Now let's do Show Interrelated Documents. So if I select that option, again, this will always open up in my default browser, but you'll see now that I have a column that's called Record Type because it's showing me constituent documentation as well as gift documentation. Okay, so that's the difference between Show Documents and Show Interrelated Documents. And these columns that you have available to you, you can always filter by any column available in any grid that you have within PaperSave. Okay. So now let's talk about the different ways that you can add documents to PaperSave. All right, so the first one is Scan Now. So this is relevant for people who have Twain compliant scanners directly connected to their workstations. Okay, so you have the ability to load your physical documentation onto your scanner, use the Add from Scanner button, and this will automatically load it onto your screen. And the benefit of this is that you don't have to scan it, save it, and then add it. You can actually just scan it directly into PaperSave. Okay, and this is relevant again for when you're trying to bring in physical documentation and when you have a Twain compliant scanner connected to your workstation. The second way that you have of adding documents are for electronic files. So you can either use the File Explorer to look in your files and select the specific file, or if you already have the File Explorer open, you can actually drag and drop directly into that quadrant. Okay, so this is useful for when you have electronic files. So for example, if someone emailed you an attachment, or if you used a network scanner to get a physical document in electronic format. And then we have Scan Later. So Scan Later is useful for when you have access to a printer, you do not have access to a PaperSave scanner, but you have physical documentation that needs to be added to PaperSave. So the point of scan later is basically you're creating a placeholder. You're telling PaperSave, hey, I have this document in front of me. This is the information that's relevant to this document, and it's going to come at a later time. So you would fill out the profile fields if there were any. You would generate your barcode sheet, your scan later barcode sheet. You would place that as a cover sheet to your documentation, and then that would be given to somebody who does have access to a PaperSave scanner. Okay, and doing this, the moment that this stack gets scanned, so the scan later cover sheet and the document itself, PaperSave will automatically know, oh, okay, I know what record this document should go on, and it'll save it. It doesn't require any other interaction from the user other than just scanning the document with the cover sheet. Okay. So now let's talk about using PaperSave outside of RE or FE. So we've talked about logging into NXT, logging into the database view, viewing documents, adding documents. Okay, but now we have the ability to interact with your PaperSave documentation without having to be in Razor's Edge or Financial Edge. Okay. So the first option that we have is PaperSave Browse. So PaperSave Browse allows you to look at all of your RE or FE records that have documentation already attached to it. Okay, the benefit of this is that you do not have to be a Razor's Edge or Financial Edge user to view these documents. So for example, let's say that you have someone in your organization that's just scanning documents. Okay, you don't necessarily have to give them access to RE or FE to be able to attach documents in PaperSave or even to be able to view documents within PaperSave. Now, it's important to remember that all of this is always controlled by your security. Okay, whatever security you have set up in PaperSave will be honored regardless of how you're accessing the documents. Okay, so if I switch over, so from my menu, I have the browse option. So if I drill into, for example, so I have Razor's Edge and I drill into constituent, this actually gives me a list of all of the constituents in the system that have documents attached to them. And this tells you the number of documents that are attached to them. Okay, so for example, we were looking at Mark Adamson earlier. That constituent has 8 documents. So if I double click on this, it opens up the same list of documents that we were reviewing before. Okay, so these are just 2 ways that you can access your documents directly from either NXT in the constituent, from the database view, from the constituent record, or directly through browse without having to access Razor's Edge at all. And then the other benefit of this is that, again, you can add documents directly to this record without having to have access to the record itself. So I can say I want to add a new document. It brings me to the add a document window. So these are all of the different acquisition methods that we talked about. Okay, so these are for electronic files. You can scan using a Twain compliant scanner. You can actually now scan using the Fujitsu FINX scanners or to generate the barcode. All right, but you can add a document here and you can save it directly to this constituent record without having to be in the constituent record itself. Okay. And then outside of PaperSave, outside of Razor's Edge or Financial Edge, we also offer PaperSave Search. So this allows you to search against all of your documents in your database, whether it's against record metadata. So that means, you can search against information that comes directly from Razor's Edge or Financial Edge. You can search against your profile fields. So let's say that you've configured fields at the document type or workflow level. You can search against those. Or even if you have searchable PDFs in your database or in your system, you can search against the content of the document itself as well. This, again, does not require an RE or an FE login. You can access it directly from PaperSave. And then there are 2 options that are offered. You can do simple search, which is just a broad keyword search, or advanced search, where you're basically building a query for what you're looking for. So if we switch over here and let's go in our menu and let's go to search. So you'll see that right now it defaults to simple, so it's just a broad keyword search. You can search for anything. For the content, again, if it's a searchable PDF, for the record information directly from RE or FE, so you can type in a constituent name for any information that's relevant to the document, or you can switch over to advanced search for documents where you're basically building the query. So for example, let's say I am looking for constituent documents, and then here I can add as many filters to my query as I'd like. So I'm going to add one, I'm going to add a condition, I'm going to say that the name equals 2, and I can actually search against my constituents. So I'm going to say Mark Adamson, since that's who we've been working with, and I'm going to go ahead and search that. You can combine as many filters as you want. So I can say, you know, I'm looking for Mark Adamson constituents between these dates, or, you know, for this specific document type. But here you'll see that it actually returns every relevant document for where the constituent name is Mark Adamson, okay? And like I said, anytime you have a grid, you can filter by any of the available columns. And if I actually wanted to view any of these documents, I could just double click on the row and the document would be displayed, right? So now let's talk about concurrent user licenses. So since you've all migrated to PaperSave Cloud, we now have to keep in mind our concurrent user licenses. So within PaperSave, there is not a limit of how many users you can create. If you're using Azure Active Directory, of course, you can either create a group for PaperSave or you can connect to your entire Active Directory. Now, if you're not using Azure Active Directory, you know that you have to create users in PaperSave Cloud. There is no limit to the number of users that you can create. You can create as many as you want. The only limit comes to how many users can be logged into the system at a single time. So this is where we have to keep in mind when we are consuming a license, okay? So we consume a license when we're logged into PaperSave through the full database view. So that means you're in the database view, your PaperSave session is enabled, you are consuming a license, okay? If you have any browser PaperSave content open, so if you have the add a document window, the view document window, any PaperSave content in a browser open, you're consuming a license. And then of course, if you have any PaperSave desktop program open, so for example, PaperSave settings, which is what administrators use, PaperSave workflow, if you're using workflow, or PaperSave scan. Okay, those three are the Windows desktop applications that we have. If you have any of those open, you are consuming a license. You do not consume a license by having the web scanning utility or the print utility installed on your computer. So what that means is if you've tried to scan from the web before, or you've tried to print a document directly from PaperSave, PaperSave will have installed a web scanning utility and a print utility on your computer. Having those installed on your computer does not consume a license. Logging into the PaperSave tile in NXT also does not consume a license. So let me switch over real quick and let me actually open up NXT. Okay, so I'm in the Mark Adamson constituent in NXT. If I scroll all the way down, I'll actually see the PaperSave tile. So this is what I talked about earlier, where if it's the first time that you're logging in, the first thing that it's going to ask you for is your root URL. Your root URL is going to be unique for each organization. And if you don't know what that is, we can provide that for you. You'll go ahead and you submit, and then it'll actually prompt you to log in if you haven't yet logged in. Okay, but so I've logged in before, I had my credentials saved, so it logged me in, and I know that because I can see the grid of documents. Now, viewing this tile here right now, I am not consuming a user license. However, the moment that I interact with PaperSave, so let's say I want to add a document, or I open up a document, now I'm consuming a license, okay? And as soon as I close this browser tab, I release that license back out. But being logged into the tile itself, you're not consuming a license. So I do recommend that you remember your credentials in the NXT tile so you don't have to be consistently plugging them back in. Okay. Filling out smart forms. So for those of you who have smart forms, which work for workflows, filling out the forms does not consume a license. And then having the Office integration or the PaperSafe printer installed on your computer does not consume a license unless, of course, you have the Add Document window open. Okay. You can be logged in up to 3 different areas with the same credential and only consume 1 license. So what that means is, let's say that I have PaperSafe settings open. Let's say I'm in the full database view and I'm enabled. And let's say that I have a browser. I'm viewing a document in my browser. So I'm logged into 3 different areas, but I'm only consuming a single license. Now, if I log into a 4th area, so let's say that now I go ahead and I open PaperSafe Scan, then I'm going to consume 2 licenses. Okay. You can free up licenses by basically getting out of whatever area is consuming that license. So if you're in the full database view, you have a few options. You can either just close out of your session entirely, or you can actually disable your PaperSafe session from the system tray. That means you can continue working in Razor's Edge or Financial Edge database view. You just won't be able to interact with PaperSave. If you have PaperSafe content open in a browser, you can close out of that browser tab or close out of the browser entirely, and that will release that license. Or if you have any PaperSafe desktop program open, you can just go ahead and close that program, and that will release the license. If there are no licenses available when you try to log into PaperSave, you're going to get a notification saying, hey, all of your organization's licenses are consumed right now, you can't log in. Currently, you cannot kick people out, but you can see who is using a license. So from your PaperSafe system start page, you have the PaperSafe licensing status area, and there's a link that says click here to see active users, which allows you to see who's logged in, where they're logged in, and what time they logged in. That login time is important because someone may have logged in, really early that morning. They may not still be using it. So you can tell them, hey, I'm trying to get into PaperSafe, but I don't have a license. Are you still on? Okay. So that was the overview of PaperSave, the basics that I wanted to cover. Okay, now let's talk about workflows. So at a very general level, workflows allow you to implement your processes in an electronic format. So at the simplest level, we can use workflow for data entry. So for example, let's say that you have all of the gifts that you received for today. So you have 10 checks in front of you. You can scan in those 10 checks and you can use that for data entry. Now the benefit of that is, let's say that you have to get approval on these checks before they get entered into Razor's Edge. Well, within workflow, we can configure steps where we tell it to go to, either an approver or a manager, and they can actually execute the approving action within the workflow itself. So that means that you do not have to be passing documentation physically, so you don't have to be handing it off. We're tracking the audit history of the document. So when it was added, who it was added by, who's approved it, who's rejected it, what are the notes, all of the history can be tracked by it. And you can configure it to really work for your specific organization's needs, right? So let's say that you only need 1 level of approval. Well, we can always send them to a single person, they get approved, and then they go to data entry. Or let's say you have more complex routing rules, right? So let's say for invoices, if they're above a certain threshold, they go to 1 person, but if they're below, they go to another person. All of that can be configured within the PaperSave workflow. So that means that there's no physical handoff, there are no discrepancies, the documents will always follow the rules that are implemented in your system. Okay, so I'm going to switch over and we're going to look at workflows. So if I go to workflow, we'll start off at the very beginning, and let's say I'm adding a new workflow item. So this is very similar to the add a document window that we saw. So there are a few ways that you can add documents to our workflow. You can again scan using a Fujitsu FINX scanner. You can scan using a Twine compatible scanner that's attached to your workstation, or you can bring in electronic files. Now for workflows, we also have what we call email drop points. So that means that we can create a dedicated email inbox that PaperSave monitors, and anytime that an email comes in with an attachment, that attachment is automatically brought into the workflow. This tends to be really convenient for invoice processing workflows because you can tell your vendors to just send their invoices directly to that mailbox. You don't have to, print them off and scan them back in. You don't have to receive them physically. You can actually just bypass the entire process of getting them and entering them into the workflow by just automatically directing them to that mailbox, which PaperSave is continuously monitoring. Okay. So let's say okay, so I'm going to add let's say I'm going to add a gift. So I'm going to drag and drop that to the workflow. You can add multiple electronic files at once. This will give you a list of all of the ones that you want. Let's say that you've used a network scanner to bring these files in. So let's say that you scanned in one file with a lot of pages in it. You can actually split them on screen. So you can say the first 2 pages belong to one gift and the next 8 pages belong to a second gift. So it'll actually split them up into different documents. So within the workflow, you'll be able to see your document. You can add annotations the same way that you can to any other document. And then you have your profile fields, okay? So your profile fields can be, you can have profile fields depending on what kind of workflow you have. So let's say that you have a workflow where you have to select your manager for approval. Okay, we can configure a profile field that's called manager, and that's a drop-down list of all of your available users. Okay, so PaperSave is fully configurable to meet each organization's needs. All right, it's very flexible. And once you've brought in the document, you would just submit it and it would go to the first step in the workflow. So it would, let's say that you had an amount field and it would read the amount and say, oh, this is above the threshold. I'm going to send it to the manager. All of that would be done automatically by the system. Okay. And then within the workflow, so let's talk about this data entry workflow that we have. This is a very simple gift data entry workflow where the purpose of it is that you can scan in all of your gift documentation up front. So like I said, you have a stack of checks or you have a stack of gift documents. You scan them all at once. You tell PaperSave where each document begins. And then you have your, let's say, 10 gift documents ready for entry in Razor's Edge. So instead of having to view the physical check and flip through the pages, you can actually just view it on screen. And you can do what we call side-by-side entry, where basically you have Razor's Edge open in one screen, you have PaperSave open in the other screen, and you're creating the gift transaction based on the information that you're viewing on your screen in PaperSave. Okay, so at this point, you no longer need the physical documentation. So the simple side-by-side data entry workflows allow you to enter in the data into your host application, so Razor's Edge or Financial Edge, and then attach the document that you're viewing. And that could be the end of a workflow, right? You may not even need routing in your workflow, but you can have options. Workflows can get more and more complex depending on your organization's needs. Okay, so we can include routing in the workflow, and there are a few other more advanced modules that we offer. So for example, we have OCR, which is optical character recognition, which means that we can configure PaperSave to actually read the information from a document. Okay, so let's say that we're talking about checks. So we're talking about gift documentation. We can configure it so that you scan in all of your checks, and then we configure fields here for the corresponding fields. So we have a constituent field, an amount field, a date field. So we can actually read the constituent, the amount, and the date, if there was a date. And even we can read the check number, the routing number, and the account number. Obviously, all of that would be dependent on your organization's needs. We can read as little as one field or as little as all the fields. And the same goes for invoices. So we often see clients use OCR for invoice processing because it's very helpful in the data entry step where it can automatically read the vendor, the amount, the date, and all the relevant information. Okay. Other than OCR, we also have what we call auto entry. So auto entry is a module that we offer that will automatically create the record in your host application for you at the end of the workflow. So let's say we're talking about invoice processing. So you start off the workflow by scanning in all of your invoices, or they're already in the workflow because they were emailed in, okay? They'll go through the appropriate routing, so whoever needs to approve each invoice will approve it. OCR will have already read the fields, so all of your fields will be populated, and then someone will execute what we call auto entry. So what auto entry will do is that it will create an invoice record in Financial Edge for the vendor that invoice belongs to. Okay, so instead of you having to be in Financial Edge in one screen and in PaperSave in the other and actually entering in all the information, PaperSave can automatically create that record for you. So overall, I mean, workflows can be configured specific to your organizations and to your needs. We often see clients that have multiple workflows for all kinds of different processes, whether it's gift processing, gift agreement, or on the FE side, we have invoice processing, journal entry processing, and they can be configured depending on how you need the documents to move. But the benefit is that you'll always have it in electronic format. The history will always be saved, and you can tell PaperSave to, you know, require the actions that you need to happen, save the fields that you need to be saved. Everything can be configured depending on what each organization needs. Okay, so that is basically it for workflows. Ellen, was there anything else that you want me to cover before we open up Q&A?
No, thank you. I think that gives a nice overview, and I think we'll just open things up to Q&A. What I will do is unmute the attendees, but also if you prefer to submit anything in the chat window, I will monitor that and can relay your questions that way as well. So let me see if I can do this. Let's try that. Yes. Okay, I think I gave you, okay, I gave everybody the capacity to unmute themselves, I believe. So anybody who has a question, feel free to unmute yourself. And if not, feel free to enter anything through the chat window, and we will have Marianne answer our questions. Oh, I see a question. Okay. So a question in the question section that came through. For the workflows, does the manager need to add access to PaperSave in order to give approval? Or where would they? That's as much as I can see of this question at this moment. So Marianne, does somebody have to be a PaperSave user in order to participate in the workflow?
Sorry, I was muted.
You're muted.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you do have to be a PaperSave user to participate in the workflow, but security can be controlled at the workflow level, similar to how you control document type security. So for example, I mean, everyone who participates in the workflow has to be a workflow user, whether you are, you know, a submitter that people can reject things back to, or you are an approver, or you're the person doing data entry, you have to be a PaperSave user. But we can set up security at each of the workflow levels where, depending on what kind of admin you are, you can see different items in the workflow. So you can set it up where people only see items assigned to themselves. So this is typically used for submitters or for approvers. You also have managers of the workflow or administrators of the workflow who have the ability to view all items in the workflow, regardless of if they're assigned to them or not. Okay, so that allows you to, keep track of where a workflow item is, what step it's sitting on, why is it sitting there for so long. And it also gives you some admin features, like for example, let's say that a specific approver has 10 items waiting for their approval, but they're actually out of the office and they forgot to set their out of office on. As an admin, you have the ability to go in there, select those workflow items, and reassign them to somebody else. Okay, but all of that can be controlled at the security level, where you can tell basically what groups of users can see what or do what in the workflow.
Thank you. Other questions, you can submit them through the chat area, or there is a question area. And I believe I gave everybody the capacity to unmute yourself individually if you'd like to verbally ask your question.
And to add on to that last question, in terms of accessing the workflow items that are pending somebody's approval, people have the ability to either access them directly through PaperSave, so you can go to the workflow area, or we can actually also configure the workflow to send out email notifications. Okay, and those email notifications are entirely customizable to when you want them sent out. They can be like a daily reminder email or only when an item gets assigned to you. But let's say you get an email saying, hey, this item got assigned to you, it's pending your approval. There will be a link with that email where you can directly access whatever's pending your action.
Okay, thank you. Did we have additional questions about PaperSave or the functions or the workflows? Anything you'd like Marianne to show or step through? It looks like we might have a question from Patricia Hicks. And Patricia, I think you're unmuted if you'd like to speak. Did we answer your question, Patricia?
Oh, the question is, will the slides be available to all? We can definitely provide them to everybody.
Yes, we could email those out. Thank you. We will also make the recording of this available. Are there any particular processes that anybody has found puzzling when you're trying to do your day-to-day work with PaperSave Cloud that you want to have Marianne perhaps step through and show? Oh, it looks like there might be something. My question window pane is very small, Marianne, but I don't know if you can see this. There's some additional questions in here.
Yep, I'm looking at it. So the last question is, how do I use PaperSave in FE while, for example, entering a cash receipt? So where would you want this documentation to be saved? I guess it depends on that, because if I go back, so let's go back to the PowerPoint, and I'm going to go back a few slides. So let's go back to the transaction types that we integrate with, okay? Okay, so these are the FE transaction types that are integrated with PaperSave. What that means is if you're doing this outside of the workflow, okay, you can be in any of these transaction types within Financial Edge, let's say in the database view, and you'll have that PaperSave button available in that record, Okay, so you'll have the ability to click the PaperSave button and say add a document to any of the records that are here that PaperSave integrates with in FE.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, I just need clarification regarding using the licenses. So, for example, I'm doing a project currently where I am having to look in several vendor records for information. So, I just want to make sure that when I click on PaperSave in that particular vendor to view the document, I'm assuming you're saying I'm using a license at that point. Now, if because I know regularly I forget sometimes to actually exit out of that record, and then I will go to another record so that view is possibly still up. So am I now using another license at that point?
No, you'll still be consuming the same license as you were before.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Good question.
Hi, I have a question as well.
Mhm.
This is Brenda Ganaway. I'm actually looking and wondering, you mentioned that we can share all of the paper save with all of the modules, the general ledgers, the AP, and you mentioned that it's a cloud. So is the assumption that once the data has been saved, it'll be always sitting in some type of database that can be retrieved anywhere in FE activities or transactions or modules?
So
Is that
kind
what's
of. So
happening?
we do have your PaperSave database is a cloud database. So any document that you add to Financial Edge, regardless of what record it's on, you can use, for example, PaperSave search to search against all of your documents, right? You're not only searching vendor documents, or you're not only searching invoice documents. You're searching for any available document within PaperSave at all.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then let me ask you, sometimes we need to verify, before we make reclasses and activities, what the original activity was from say a GL detail account report or from a summary of a query, and we like to attach that in our paper save documentation. Is there a way to bridge the two without having to save it as a PDF and then upload it into a paper save, the report that you would run? So in other words, if I run a report in General Ledger or AP or any of the other modules, and I just want that little snip of what was the actual activity to verify that it needed to be reclassed, do I have to go through the normal process of going out of the system, saving it, and then adding it back? Or is there a way you can bridge the gap and say, okay, I want this document saved right here on the screen?
Right. No, I mean the way to do it would be the way that you said. You would have to save that and then add it to, wherever it is that you wanted that saved.
Okay, so we're not at that sophistication level. Okay, I'll take that. There's one question that I had. I just forgot. Oh, going in and out of NXT versus the old version with the paper save document, I think you alluded to, maybe you can still bridge the two gaps together. We have NXT, but then we're still using the old, and everyone hasn't 100% converted over.
Yeah, and that's totally okay. So if you add a document to, for example, an invoice in the database view, if you open that same invoice record in NXT, that document will be available there.
Okay, and then at one point, when I was looking at the screen, it looked like I was in Affinity. So are these documents shareable with, not Affinity, yes, Affinity, that's correct. FE versus Affinity. Are these the same type documents that get shared or no?
Tell me more about Affinity.
Okay, so I wasn't looking, when you were talking about constituent information, that made me think you were referring to Affinity. They both are blackball products.
Okay.
And I thought we were doing intersharing of data when you were discussing it earlier.
Well, if the fundraising systems that we integrate with for constituent records with PaperSave include at this point Razor's Edge with both the database and the NXT view, and Blackbaud CRM. So the other
Okay,
Blackbaud fundraising
that's what it is.
products out there, we are not integrated with at this time.
Okay, and I think we've adapted that name, Blackbaud CRM, for the Affinity. But Affinity is the donor
Oh.
drive
Oh,
revenue.
okay.
Yeah, so
Hmm.
Affinity is BBCRM, Ellen.
Yep. Yes.
Oh, okay, okay. Then
Okay, so we
yes.
can share what they put in as well as, well, we can retrieve some of their documentation and put it into our system electronically.
So it depends. If you have Financial Edge and BBCRM, you can
Yeah.
have PaperSave for Financial Edge and also PaperSave for Blackbaud CRM. Okay, so it
Yeah.
depends on whether you're integrated with both, and if you are and you have the ability to see documentation in either one. Let's say, for example, you're searching in PaperSave Search, you'll actually search against both Financial Edge and CRM.
It would be the same data in the cloud.
Exactly, it would be the
Yes.
same database, the same PaperSave database. That's correct.
Okay, and so let me make sure I'm clear. Right now, we all have two different logon accesses, one to BBCRM and one to FE. And so as a data flow process, you're saying if I go into BBCRM and actually pull up documentations that have been set out there, that is sitting in the cloud, and I can also go into FE and find that in either system, or I have to download it and then add it to the next system if I need it.
So, right, so they're not going to be direct, so you're not going to see BBCRM documentation from Financial Edge, and you're not going to see Financial Edge documentation from BBCRM. But when we were talking about, for example, PaperSave Search, so if I go actually here, and you have the search functionality, okay, you'd actually be searching against your documentation in CRM and in Financial Edge, okay? But we're not actually transferring data from FE to CRM or from CRM to FE. We just offer the ability for you to search against all of your documents in your database, whether they're related to FE
Oh,
records or CRM
yeah.
records.
Yes. Okay. So, and I think you mentioned there was a ID we would need to gain access to the data. Okay, that makes sense. All
Mhm.
Yep.
right.
So I
Okay.
also just should clarify, this depends on whether or not you have purchased the PaperSave for CRM licensing. So
Uh-oh,
yeah,
we
so
don't
if
know.
so right, so if you have PaperSave and we've integrated with your FE and you've got PaperSave for FE licensing, that is a different thing from PaperSave for CRM licensing. So if you get the PaperSave for CRM licensing, we take that one PaperSave database and we link it to both.
Mm-hmm.
And then it works as Marianne has described. So it's one document database in PaperSave, and documents are, you can have a document linked to CRM, you can have a document linked to FE, you can look at them and search your PaperSave database as being
Mm-hmm.
between both systems. But
Okay.
you would need licensing for PaperSave for CRM.
Okay, you got my thinking cap on. I've got one
Yeah.
more question, and then we'll let somebody else have questions. We do have in those modules different places we can add paper save. So if, for example, if we're keying in the AR module, there is on page number 1 an opportunity for a paper save, and then on page 2 when we're drilling down to actually key in maybe a payment or apply a payment, there's another opportunity for a paper save. But in those opportunities to save papers in those different levels of the form or the actual open activity, there are limitations. You might be able to see it here, you might not be able to see it there. And I'm wondering how would that work with this data flow? If we save something, you're saying you're just putting it somewhere else separate, but then in our area, if we don't save it in the right place, would it actually flow in your right place, or is that an issue?
So, I mean, it would depend on, what are the different locations that we're talking about. But I think what you're referring to has to do with the interrelated documents. Um,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
so there are certain relationships that are out of the box with PaperSave, and I'll provide those to you with the PowerPoint after the webinar.
Okay.
I can let you know which ones come out of the box. Now, if there's a relationship that you don't see there, but that you use in your system, that's something that we can engage with you on, and we can configure that for you. Okay, so we do
Mm-hmm.
have the ability to create additional relationships than what comes directly out of the box.
Okay. All
So
right.
then, but then to also
Technology.
add on that, Marianne, when you're designing your workflow, one of the key things is we do need to know, in order to design a workflow, where the document is going to be attached in Financial Edge at the
Right.
end of the flow. So you
Uh-oh.
would
Exactly.
be thinking to yourself and designing, oh, this is going to be an invoice document, for example. So that is
Mhm.
an element of how documents are organized in PaperSave, where the record type that they are attached to in Financial Edge
Mhm.
is sort of a core way the documents are organized in PaperSave. And so document types sit specifically to what type of record they're attached to in Financial Edge. So if we design a workflow that is all about an invoice document, you would not use that workflow for then a different type. That make
Okay,
sense?
that makes sense. Yes, it does.
Okay.
The parameters have to be put in place
Yeah.
for how you're going to use it. And
Yeah.
so is that something that needs to happen for our organization, or it has happened? Where are we with these next steps
Well, I don't know
in
if you have
terms
any
of
workflows
workflow
configured.
designing?
So
Yeah, I don't
what
either.
you could
Okay.
do is afterwards, if you want to email us, we can figure out, which of our folks have been handling your project and where you are in the steps to bring you into cloud
Mhm.
and what you've got in your system.
Okay, well, we have a
So,
representative for our company, Tori Foster, so I'll just reach out to her. I'm sure she's connected with you all in
okay.
the status of things.
All right. That sounds good.
Okay.
Good.
Hmm.
And you can also feel free to email me directly. This is Ellen. You'll see me on the emails that we're going to send out after this, and you are welcome to contact me directly. And I can also make sure that we find out more about your particular organization's setup.
Sounds good. Very
Good.
good. Thank you.
Any other questions from the group about workflows, functionality in PaperSave, things that you'd like Marianne to show to the group?
So we have a few questions, Ellen, here
Okay,
in
good.
the webinar. So the first one is PaperSave Cloud is noticeably slower in pulling up documents than FE Cloud, where the documents used to be stored. Any ideas why? That may have to do specifically with your organization. If that's the case, if you're seeing this consistently, whether it's one user or across several users, I think it would be best for us to connect either, whoever is handling your migration project or someone from customer support. A lot of times there are things that are particular to, the way that your group policies are set up or any kind of security that you have that may cause differences in performance. But if you are seeing, that the performance is kind of slow, we can definitely do some troubleshooting with you. The next question is, can we still attach a PDF, email, or similar file types via the search of our drives or folders where the attachments will be located? Yes, so you can still attach any kind of electronic file. You can drag and drop it directly, you can use the file explorer, but as long as you have it saved on your computer, you can attach it electronically to a record or add it as a workflow item to PaperSave.
And I should repeat that we are going to share a recording of this webinar and make it available to all attendees. And we will send out the PowerPoint that Marianne has been using and any other information that we can provide that might be helpful. Other questions people would like to ask? Okay. All right. It feels like we're done then. So thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate your taking time and bringing your questions and listening to our presentation. And we're very happy to have you on PaperSave Cloud. We hope you find it useful in your day-to-day. And we'll look forward to continuing to serve you through support and through our professional services group. Thanks, everybody, and have a happy new year.